Why do you think this area, the southwest in particular, southeastern Arizona, is such a hotbed for paranormal activity?
Well, for one, this is Bisbee. We have a huge copper and mineral deposit here in this area. We did a lot of mining here. There's still a lot in the ground, so that produces energy. Entities are attracted to energy, and so therefore they would be, it would be a conduit, let's say, for energy. And some people pick up on that a little bit more. Some people have a little more susceptibility to that. But this would definitely be a place. This is also native land. This is Apache land. A lot of different reasons why there would be spirits trapped here.
Hidden within the shadows, throughout tales that span generations, monsters exist in many forms. Explore the folklore, embrace its most important lasting features, and delve into information of the unexpected. These are Monster Myths. What you know about monsters could save a life, possibly even your own. I need you to help me inform the masses. I'm Kephen Sting, and tonight's Monster Myths features part 2 of La Llorona, the woman at the old Charleston Bridge. That's right, I'm doing a slightly different episode this time. I realized early on that I would need a part 2 to be able to display all the information I'd found during the previous episode. You see, what we were able to learn about La Llorona in the last show has brought us to a real-life destination. Only perhaps it's not where you would have imagined the story would take us. You see, during my recent research excursions, I've managed to become aware of a small county in southeastern Arizona. An already rich area for folklore, Cochise County is home to sites such as Tombstone, Bisbee, Sierra Vista, and Fort Huachuca. From within these towns, there has developed several pockets for paranormal folklore to gather. From the early mining days, the Old West, and an old military base, all contain stories retold on through the generations. Why is southern Arizona such a hotbed for these type of stories, this folklore and paranormal activity?
You know, there was a lot of people down here. I mean, and Bisbee back in the day was 50,000 people down here. I mean, and a lot of oppression, a lot of ugly deeds, a lot of mean-spirited actions that happened down here. I mean, like prostitution, drugs. There's a lot of money down here. So the stock exchange. I mean, you know, this is real. I mean, there was real capitalism down here. It was very oppressive and also cutthroat. A lot of people died down here. Really. I mean, this place was a hotbed. I mean, you know, we think it's bad in Chicago right now, but back in the 1800s, early 1900s, it was real out here. I mean, people almost every day just on this little tiny street, you know, because of bad debts or drugs or whatever, alcohol mostly, probably. But also prostitution, and you know, the only women down here, mostly at the beginning, were prostitutes. I mean, they weren't women accompanying their husbands or their families here until the 30s. They really didn't get that way at all. It was a lot of it was a wild. I mean, like Tombstone's a joke compared to here. I mean, this was where it really happened right here in Old Bisbee in 1908. I mean, this was the happiest, meanest, most wildest town in this area.
Basically, this county is a treasure trove of ghost stories and paranormal events. But what brought me here was the legend of La Llorona. See, one version of the legend occurs here on what is known as Old Charleston Road, in between the outskirts of Sierra Vista and the town too tough to die, Tombstone. To my left is the new Charleston Bridge. To my right is the remains of the old Charleston Bridge that once connected the east and west sides together. Now, this site is renowned in this county for its historical and supernatural significance. Yet what makes this so interesting is that in my search for a single legend, I came upon several. something that I'm labeling myth stacking, as these myths seem to stack one upon the other over time. Now, why am I discussing this location with you? Well, I happen to live in a small town of Perspiration, Arizona. And when I first began interviewing folks about La Llorona, a good percentage of people from this state were telling me about a story with a woman who drowned her 2 young children in the San Pedro River down in southeastern Arizona. The story continued that the woman had been in love with a man who later left her. Sound familiar? Well, it should. It's basically one of the variations of the La Llorona myth. Only the second half had a twist. If it was raining as you drove over the bridge and you heard the woman's crying, you could experience misfortune. If you saw her and didn't stop, there's a good chance that you could get into an accident. And that's not all. If she so chose, she could appear inside your car without you even stopping. You'd be driving, and all of a sudden, she would appear right next to you or in the back seat. And if that happened, well, you better do as you're told or risk certain death. These are some pretty drastic consequences, huh? Yet no matter how similar this tale is to La Llorona, it appears to be what is called a mashup, a combination of elements from similar myths. But I'll admit, at first I made the mistake of just writing it off as that alone. And as I would find out, there's a lot more going on at this location than I first imagined. The additional stories I heard were more mashups similar to La Llorona, but again, they had this exact Charleston Bridge crossing the San Pedro River as its key location. It sure seemed that something had gone on at this spot. Maybe many things. The next myth variation began with the old familiar setup. The woman was with a gentleman who detested children. So in order to run away with her lover, she drowned her 2 kids. Once he heard this, the gentleman rejected her. The woman then killed herself in anguish. You see how this mirrors the crying woman story segments? However, now as a ghost, she haunts the bridge, not as a hollow-eyed spirit, but more as a damsel in distress, much like a siren. Now, if you drive by this bridge, see her, and pull over to pick her up, she will ask you to take her to the local courthouse in order to get her children back. Not sure why the courthouse, but it was a real landmark, and it does make me wonder about the backstory here. The word is that these drivers who pick her up are never heard from again. Now check this one out. It started with a woman driving out to the bridge and waiting to meet up with her boyfriend. Somehow another car struck hers and killed her instantly. Now you see her ghost, much like the other tellings, haunting the bridge and the river. However, this variation states that if you see her on the side of the road and don't stop and pick her up, you will have an accident and die. I can only imagine what would happen if you did pick her up. That would be a pretty awkward drive. Now, this telling is obviously different, but shares elements of the other versions. But you have the depiction of her driving her car to meet her boyfriend. That dates this story into a modern decade, which is quite a ways off from the time period of the other tales. So the question is, are there generations of tales in this area? One decade may have reinforced a particular myth for a time until a new story evolved. I mean, these stories might not even represent the same ghost. You think there could be more than one ghost? I do. So at this point, I was surprised when I was told yet another version of this tale by the bridge that could have been older than the rest. In this next myth, she is not known as Maria or the Crying Woman, but as Lady Charleston, during what we would assume would be back in the Old West. She hid her children during an Apache raid. Somehow, during the assault, she lost her children and went crazy trying to find them. So the ghost at the bridge could actually be her. Now, this myth is striking, and the story has a bit more historical context to it. So what do we do with all these versions? More and more, I'm suspecting that this particular spot on the Charleston Road is somehow a magnet for these tales, and through the generations have been mashed up and simultaneously stacked upon the other. Therefore, stacked myths. However, with this stacking theory, I had to wonder, what is the bottom piece? Or is there one? Could something have preceded these myths, initializing a vortex of these legendary events over the span of time? In plain speech, I wondered just what started it all, to which everything after it stacked upon it. Perhaps I would never find out.
You've had no personal contact with Lady Charleston?
No. I heard about her, but I don't know.
What can you tell me about her?
Not much. I mean, it's the same with a lot of the ghost stories in Bisbee. They're very ethereal, just like themselves, the ghosts themselves. I mean, there's actually hundreds of ghosts supposedly walking the street every night. I mean, this was a brothel. This was a brothel in 1918, 1920, and there's a lot of weird spirits down here.
Can you tell me about Billy?
Little Billy was a young boy that his mother worked at the Copper Queen Hotel. She was a housekeeper there. He drowned in the San Pedro River and eventually found his way back to his mom. And he still resides there and likes to play tricks on everyone and play pranks mostly.
Now, for those of you who don't know, the San Pedro River is the location of the Lady Charleston, the Old Charleston Road. Now, part of the legend is that when people approach her, she'll summon them for a ride. Would you stop? Give her a ride?
Yeah. I mean, depending on how transparent she was. I mean, my opinion of ghosts, I mean, they're transparent, right? I mean, well, at least we think so. I don't even know.
I suppose there are things you can do metaphysically to protect yourself from ghosts. Gemstones, prayers, and wards of protection, for example. Although I'm not really an expert in that field, but maybe it helps. The same goes for religious traditions in your dimension, although perhaps they could offer protection as well. I can tell you this. I looked deeper into the background of this area of Cochise County, and what I found certainly makes for an interesting development.
In 1846, there was an unusual attack held on this very ground. The Mormon battalion were attacked by rampaging bulls.
Their entire camp was ravaged, including several wagons decimated and soldiers injured. But they had to slow the attacking beasts. They targeted the largest bull, the lead bull, and took the animal out. Once that happened, they were able to calm the rest of the bulls and lead them off the camp. And so this real-life tale is remembered by the tongue-in-cheek name, the Battle of the Bulls, made even more ironic by the fact that during the Mormon battalion's journey west, this would end up being their only battle. Since the Battle of the Bulls event, a number of other things contributed to the historical underpinnings of the area. I now know that the bridge there wasn't started until 1913, which helps us to begin to picture when all these tales were born, considering several of them, like the Battle of the Bulls, must have originated before the bridge had been built. Also, and possibly more importantly, the town of Charleston, just 3/4 of a mile from the section of the river, was barely developing when an earthquake hit in 1887. That pretty much decimated the community into a ghost town. Knowing all this definitely reveals other facets of the area. What an interesting bit of history to set against all this folklore. Now, because the battle and the earthquake have specific dates, we can kind of imagine these stories in an arrangement. The oldest so far is the Battle of the Bulls, or possibly the Lady Charleston story. If that's the case, the others would stack upwards during the decades. One thing is for certain. The histories, the stories, well, they just don't go away. People seem to enjoy sharing these myths. It's woven into the fabric of this particular local culture, which to me, all things considered, makes this area here in Cochise County fairly unique. But what is the purpose for these tales? I can hypothesize that they are mostly to scare people into making good choices with their lives. Yet there seems to be more to it all. Lessons we are to glean from these tragic tales. Maybe even if it's only to be extra cautious around this bridge. You know the details of these myths now. So what do you believe? Are these tales merely to scare, or is there a resemblance to a darker side of humanity? I wonder, is there a crying woman myth near your home? Or I'm also curious if this kind of myth stacking has occurred in other areas of the country. Perhaps even yours? Write to me, faithful viewers. Let me know not only what you think of these stories I went through today, but perhaps tell me about stories in your neck of the woods. Now, also be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you enjoy the show and want to see more episodes. And please remember to share the show with your friends. There are a lot of folks out there if we're going to inform the masses. Tales of the strange and mysterious embed themselves into the tapestry of our existence. But often we need reminders of myths nearly lost along the fringe. What do the haunted spirits of the earth have to say when it's their turn to speak? I'm Kephen Sting, and these are Monster Myths.